to him so that I talked to him. He was remorseful. He was actually there. I don't know how this all works. So, now he used your high school ID to show that it's yours every day at study. But the guy's never there.
Good evening, everyone. This is a regular session of the Board of Education. The board has already met in executive session, so we have already done the salute to the flag and the roll call. I'd like to call the meeting to order at this point. Welcome to everyone. I'm glad to see all of you here. I'd like to just draw your attention to the statement of public notice, which is number 6 on your agenda, and point out a few things. You can read that on your own, but I just wanted to point out the fact that we are recording board meetings now, so and making them available on the website, so the meeting will be recorded. There are 2 times during meetings that the public is invited to speak. We're going to kind of change things up a little bit on the agenda. The first time for the public to speak will be item number 9, public forum on agenda items. After that, we're going to do a board forum where we can give our comments and response instead of making you wait till the very end of the meeting, which is when we normally do our board forum. So we're just going to add one additional item under the first public forum. And then at the end of the meeting, there's another public forum on non-agenda items, if anyone wants to speak on something that wasn't on the agenda. So I just wanted to point that out. The only other change is that we're going to ask that people keep it to a 5-minute limit when they come up to speak. We have a lot of people here tonight, and I'm sure that we all want to hear what everyone has to say. If you're in agreement with something that somebody says and you just want to stand up to acknowledge what they said, then you won't have to come up and say the same thing. That might help too. Dr. Vierik has graciously accepted the position of timekeeper, so he has a little yellow card he can hold up. It's hard to keep track of how long you've been talking for. And last time I didn't want to bang the gavel at people while they were talking, so I thought that would be a little bit nicer to do. Okay? So we are now going to have the board presentation. The board is going to go down and sit in the audience for the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Markarian. I'm the superintendent, and in response to a request from the Board of Education, I promised that I would give a brief overview of the current programs, policies, and practices that the district currently uses to address substance abuse. And at the conclusion of this brief presentation, we will entertain questions from board members. I did ask for a few folks to be here tonight to help answer some questions that might come up. So I just want to recognize and thank some of our administrators. Mr. Howlett, I see, Mr. Shello, Mrs. Hudak is here, Ms. Shadis is here, and we have our 2 resource officers from both the high school, middle school here, as well as Mr. Gilkin, our substance abuse counselor here at Ridge. So I certainly appreciate you folks coming out tonight. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll get started. So just briefly, the health curriculum is really where we design most of our instruction with respect to drugs and alcohol, especially at the elementary grades. And just briefly, you can see the topics that are covered in each of the elementary grades. And you should note that there is required curriculum that has to be done at each grade level in the health curriculum. It's a pretty full curriculum, and therefore we are not spending the entire time on any of these individual topics. All of our curriculum is maintained on our district website. If you go under the curriculum link, you can go to our Rubicon system where we keep track of all the curricular objectives, and you can see some more details there, but this is just a brief outline of where we cover the topics in the elementary school. At the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it breaks down as tobacco in the 6th grade, alcohol and drugs in the 7th grade, and social and emotional health decisions in the 8th grade. And finally, at the high school, the context of drug and alcohol education occurs in the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade as shown, and in the 12th grade, the focus becomes on the transition to high school, or excuse me, to colleges, so the discussion transitions to date, rape, drugs, alcohol on college campuses. Finally, we use a combination of assembly programs throughout some of our different grades to address this, all the way from the elementary levels through the middle school and into Ridge High School. And our school resource officers are key components in helping us with this particular area. Mrs. Baldessari, she teaches the 5th grade DARE program with another officer. They split up the 4 elementary schools 2 and 2. Ms. Baldessari does 2 of the schools, and another officer does the other 2 schools. We used to do 7th grade DARE. About 5 or 6 years ago, we stopped that. However, Tracy still goes into the 7th grade classes and is able to spend a day or two with each of the 7th grade health classes to talk about drugs and alcohol. It's a little bit less than what we used to do, but she's still able to make the time to get into the 7th grade health classes. Here are some of the other roles that the school resource officers perform. They help us when we have our class meetings. They help us with assemblies and talking to the kids in large groups. They're very responsive in assisting in our crisis response and violence prevention situations. And when something comes up that's really beyond the scope of what the school is able to handle, they take care of it on the police level, often bringing to bear other resources in their department. It should be understood that school resource officers are actual police officers. They are not employed by the Board of Education. They're employed by the Berners Township Police Department. We have one SRO in Mr. Neiman who works here at the high school full-time. Ms. Baldessari is the other SRO. She works most of the time at William Allen Middle School, but as I indicated before, she does the 5th grade DARE instruction, so she is often not at William Allen. She's often at one of the elementary schools. She's also the person that responds to an elementary school if an issue arises at an elementary school that requires police attention. So she's spread pretty thin. We have 2 student assistance counselors that also spend a great deal of time helping to respond to situations that come up with drug and alcohol problems. 2 at the high school are working full-time, Chad Gillikin and Megan Hoffman, and as I mentioned, Chad is here with us tonight. Both Megan and Dr. Bush were unable to be here this evening. Dr. Bush is the student assistance counselor that works at William Allen. Many of the roles that the student assistance counselors take on have to do with response. Their time is also spread very thin. I know that Mrs. Hudak in the last couple of budget cycles has been expressing an interest in getting another student assistant counselor at William Allen. As you know, staffing is one of the largest drivers of our budget, and we haven't been able to make that happen to date. And they've also been involved in recent legislation to enact the HIB statutes, which require that our student assistance counselors, as well as our other counselors, are intimately involved in our harassment, intimidation, and bullying investigations. So their time has been further taxed in trying to be responsive to those investigations. Some of the other prevention efforts that go on in the district include peer leader programs, character education programs at both the elementary school and the middle school, as well as the high school. Grade level meetings with the administration occur in this facility, as well as the other large group meeting rooms in the schools at the auditorium at Annan, or the multi-purpose rooms at the elementary schools when the school administrators, the guidance counselors, the SACs, the SROs hold meetings with the students to talk to them about these issues of substance abuse, as well as the school rules associated with them. Intervention and referral services are sometimes implemented. In those cases, that's often a response to a situation that arises. We have other structures in the district to try to deter behaviors such as contracts with student athletes and project graduation at the high school level. And for those of you that were in this very room a couple of weeks ago, we put on an event in collaboration with many entities of the town, including the police department and the municipal alliance, with the Pills to Heroin program. So we try to do outreach such as that. And sometimes we do separate correspondence to parents, whether it be summer mailings as part of the beginning of the school year, or separate letters to communicate issues as the school year goes on. We view our athletic and our co-curricular programs as an excellent resource for students, if you will, to try to keep them out of trouble. It keeps the students busy and gives them something productive to do with some of their free time. And we've tried to add additional supervision at some of our sporting events. In addition, we do surveys. We just finished in February of this school year the American Drug and Alcohol Survey, which we'll be reporting out probably in June. If we don't have that survey ready to be presented before the end of the school year, we may hold off presenting that until September, when folks are back in town, to have the opportunity to hear what those results were. Our board policy, we have an existing board policy for suspicion-based testing for drugs and alcohol. In that instance, the bullet points above kind of describe the process, but basically a suspicion-based policy works exactly like that. It's enacted when there's a suspicion that a student might be under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and the student is then referred, and the school nurse is immediately involved to make sure that the first thing that is addressed is that that student's health and safety is monitored and maintained. The parents are contacted, and then testing arrangements are made. Sampling for drugs and alcohol has to be completed within 4 hours of the referral. Otherwise, the conclusion is made that there is a violation. And the consequences for the first and second offenses involve 4 to 10 day suspensions, as well as loss of parking privileges at the high school. Obviously, unless I'm surprised, we don't have any middle schoolers driving, so that doesn't occur there. Continued offenses beyond a second offense would be handled at the recommendation of the administration. Other policies, some of you may have been around in 2007 to 2011 at some of our board meetings where other policies were looked at, including a random drug testing policy. We talked about that at several board meetings in the past. At this point, we haven't had enough support to establish doing a program such as that, but there is extensive research, and if any of you have looked at it, you've probably seen support on both sides from the various entities that put together reports on random drug testing policies. Random locker searches and random canine drug sweeps. That question came up actually in this room. I remember hearing a couple of folks bring that question up. Why don't we do some canine drug sweeps? So just so that you understand, we did take that into consideration, or I did, when I heard that suggestion, and I spoke directly to the county prosecutor as well as one of the assistant prosecutors, and I talked to Mr. Howlett about it as well. And I spoke to the police chief for Berners Township. And what I learned was that there's a lot involved in just making arrangements for them, which isn't to say that if this isn't something that there's support for that we couldn't do. However, it's not something that we can do at the drop of a hat. The arrangements that need to be made involve the request and permission of the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office, because they're actually the ones that arrange the dog searches based on the number of lockers. They have to coordinate the number of dogs and bring to bear the right workforce to do it. So it's not something that can be done very easily, and it does have a lot of pros and cons. The police chief, when he spoke to the prosecutor's office on my behalf, got me some information about it. I went through a 90-plus page document that describes the different pros and cons to doing random canine drug sweeps in the schools. And those pros and cons involve a lot of different things. You know, when you think about doing dog sweeps, if no dog sweeps, just as an example of some of the information that was in this report, you know, if you do a dog sweep and you don't find anything, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, maybe from our perspective, we look at it as a really good thing. We sent dogs around the building and they didn't find anything. But if the students are clever enough to hide things in a way that the dogs aren't going to find, since the dogs are not allowed to actually sniff the person or the body of a student, then have we just reinforced that they know how to get away with it and doing dog sweeps isn't going to be productive at all? So that's just an example of some of the pros and cons that this document, this guidance, really a guidance document that the chief procured for me. So if that's something that we want to do, I think we should take a little bit more time to look at whether or not that's a good plan, because there are a lot of issues there. Our survey data. In order to inform what we're doing, we do, as I mentioned earlier, collect survey information, and we survey the students. We've been doing the American Drug and Alcohol Survey. Well, we've done it 8 times since the 1990-1991 school year, and as I just mentioned earlier tonight, we just finished the 8th round of surveying in February of 2014 this year, and we will be presenting that at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. We've also done student stressors and asset survey, which was administered twice in 2005 and 2012. And recently we also partnered with Rutgers in their Rutgers Safe and Drug-Free Schools project in 2009-2010. And all of these various surveys are still maintained on the district website. If you go under board presentations, you can see the results of these different surveys. And again, we will be reviewing in in probably June or September, the results of the February 2014 survey. And when we do that, we always look back at the survey information that we already have so that we get a nice timeline of the various surveys that we've done in the American Drug and Alcohol Survey. Police data is other data that we can gather and we can take a look at. There's county and state data that we can take a look at. At the Pills to Heroin Night, I talked a little bit about some data, which was statistics that I got from actually the Department of Health. And they actually have quite a lot of information on their website. If you go to NJDOE Department of Health and you navigate a little bit through their homepage, one of the interesting statistics that I looked at and reported briefly on at the Pills to Heroin Night involved admissions to healthcare facilities. And really by that we're talking about inpatient and outpatient facilities for rehab and care of those folks that have addictions. What I was also very interested to find out was what kind of information could we get on emergency room admissions. Because when I looked at the word admissions, I was thinking, oh, that could be emergency rooms, but as it turns out, that the report that I was looking at was really for rehab type facilities, of which there are roughly 300 of in the state. I contacted the woman that puts those reports out for the health department, and she was sharing some of this information with me, and I said to her, do you have any information on emergency room admissions? Because I was curious to see if there were any trends that corroborated this problem that we're hearing about with heroin that might reveal themselves by looking at data about emergency room admissions at hospitals. So she said that they did have some data like that on a county basis, and she would send that information to me via email. I haven't gotten it yet, but it's something I'd be happy to share when it comes in. Hopefully it will. Professionals, what their experience is now, obviously school administrators, parents, school resource officers, a lot of people collect their experiential data, what they experience in their day-to-day work or in their lives or what they're seeing at home, and that's another way that we get information that lets us know where we don't seem to have a problem. So taking into consideration where we are, what we have in front of us, these are some of the things that I was thinking about going forward, having taken a look at a lot of the current activities that we're doing in the district. So I think that's probably large enough for you to read, but one of the things that I've been taking a look at is, if we're going to do more education, where are we going to do that education? As I mentioned before, the health curriculum is pretty full. And there's not a lot of opportunity to just say, well, let's add 10 more days of drug education to the health curriculum if, in fact, we're meeting curricular objectives that are prescribed by the state in the curriculum that has to be covered with students in health classes. So one of the things I think we could take a look at is opportunities to do some instruction in maybe some more creative places like study halls. And that's a place where maybe we could spend more time with our SACs and our SROs if we can free them up to do it. And that is an issue because, as I described earlier, I was trying to give you a little bit of an idea of how busy both our student assistance counselors and our SROs are, and they can really be the most expert folks to help you do this kind of education. So that's why I talked about the next bullet point there, in evaluating their workloads. Reviewing applicable board policies. I mentioned one in our suspicion-based policy and our curriculum to see if there's any other policies or practices that we might want to put in place that could help us with this most recent trend of heroin problems that we're seeing. And collaboration. I think it's important that we collaborate because when you think about all the different venues that are involved in a topic like substance abuse among youth, there's a lot of different factors out there that come into play. Certainly, we can do what we can do here at school, and it may be that we can do some more things here at school. But school is just one place. We have a community, and communities involve families, communities involve the municipality, communities involve police forces and EMS. There's a lot of factors that go into play when you're trying to deal with a problem as large as substance abuse among youth. It's not just what the schools can do, but obviously we're more than happy to try to do more where we can here in schools. So I think that's important that we take a look together at some of the data, which I think this district has always had a great relationship with the health department, and we've always collaborated to look at that ADAS survey and done things like the Pills to Heroin Night. So I think that relationship is important to cultivate and continue to collaborate as we take a look at this problem again. Sorry about that. Jumped out of there. Okay, so taking a look again at the recommendations of the Rutgers Safe and Drug-Free Schools Community Project, in the last few weeks I've kind of collected a stack of all the different reports that have come out in the last several years, and it's about that high, and I started to go through some of it and saw some recommendations in there that might be worth revisiting. And of course, as I just mentioned earlier, working with our health department and coming up with ideas such as the Safe Homes program that I know has apparently gotten some traction in town and I think holds some potential to help us deal with this problem. And that's it. So at this point, let's take some questions from the board. If there's any questions, you can use that mic right there.
Okay, at this point, we're going to allow board members to ask questions about the presentation. We're going to hold off on our opinions and our comments about the recommendations right now. We're just going to ask about the stuff that Nick spoke about in the presentation. So I'll pass the mic. Maybe I'll start on this side this time.
Nick, I just wanted to get clarification on the board policy. Is there anything about mandatory treatments for the students if with the suspicion-based testing?
Yes. They have to meet with the SACs if the tests come back positive. And generally through that process, they're working with the family to try to help them to come up with some ways to help deal with the situation.
So maybe here's where I'd like to see, I know you don't have it in the top of your head, but I'd like to see more statistics. Are the families accepting treatment? Are they not accepting treatment? Is there denial? What is happening in our school currently?
Chad, you want to speak to that a little bit? Thanks.
So the questions about when families are identified, their kids identified, and the families are spoken to by myself or Meg Hoffman or Dr. Bush, how accepting are they of treatment recommendations? And that, as you might imagine, varies case by case. Some are very open to getting help, and we make very appropriate referrals with local outpatient providers. I can go through some of the lingo with you. It's intensive outpatient programs. There's intervention programs that are like extended evals. All of this is on my website. That's on the Burns Board of Ed website. And of course, local individual providers. So depending on the acceptance of the family and or the kid for treatment, they accept varying levels of recommendations. We do have some statistics on that information, yes. For drug and alcohol referrals specifically, as well as mental health.
Is it on the website or?
No. Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure why I have the microphone, and I didn't like the presentation. I think we're tiptoeing around the issue, and I don't want to make a comment, but I do want to hear from the public, and then I want to make some comments. This is not fixing anything. This is just pretending that it's
Mike, right now we're just doing
not a
questions.
problem.
You can say what you want to say when we go back
Well,
up.
I just wait until I get my notes.
Okay.
Are we going to get a chance to communicate with the public
Yes,
on this topic?
after they have their public forum, we're going to talk.
And then we're going to get
Yeah.
a chance to comment?
Yes, we're just doing questions on the presentation right
And
now.
I'll save all my comments.
Okay, save them for then. Thanks.
Because this isn't doing it, folks, not for me.
Thank you very much for the presentation. There have been some questions about the jurisdiction the school has around activities that take place on the school grounds, like the football games and things like that, competitive, where you have people from the public coming. Is there any, what kind of jurisdiction does the school have, if any?
Well, on the suspicion,
I've been handed the answer. Yeah, that's right.
the suspicion-based policy applies on our school property.
I actually.
Or also at school-sponsored events, it could be away from our school property if it's, say, an away sporting event, for example.
I had a question about the suspicion-based testing. I know there's concern that there's much more abuse happening at the school than people realize. We have an officer who's in our high school, so I'm wondering, we have a certain amount of students who are are tested because of suspicion every year. How many, do we think this is a representative of people who should be tested? I mean, I think we would assume that if there's a police officer in the building, they would know whether you thought, is a reasonable number.
You want to try that one, John? Yeah. You want to try?
We're going to fight over this one.
I didn't even hear the feedback, so
So I think if I understood correctly, the question is, to what extent is the suspicion-based policy bringing us suspicion-based candidates?
Yes.
Okay.
Enough. Is it enough? Do we feel like we're getting
Right.
what we need to get?
Or are there lots of kids going around under the influence that no one's suspecting? Okay.
I can tell you we have data on this issue as well, and our numbers have gone down significantly with suspicion-based reporting in the school. Not because kids are using less or using less when they come to school, but because it's being reported out less. So we have less kids going out for suspicion-based testing than I think maybe ought to be.
The same issue. I don't really get involved with the suspicion-based testing, but I have worked with the core team and other functions to identify people under the influence and things like that. And what he's saying is what he tells me is that our numbers are going down significantly in terms of referrals.
So I think that speaks to the issue of training too, and spending more time with the staff, training them on this issue.
Regarding the next steps, I'd like to add something to the first bullet, which is reviewing the school schedules and looking for opportunities to increase instructional time. I would really like to see some feedback from the teachers who are delivering this curriculum on what's effective, what's really making an impact on the students, what's getting their attention, and maybe modify the existing curriculum to include more things that really cause a reaction, a response, some learning. And I think the classroom teachers are a resource for that. As far as the canine sweeps of the school, I know that we need to understand it more before we press go on that. But I wanted to know, would there be a cost to our schools if we were to pursue this option?
I have been told there is not a cost to have that particular service done to our school directly. I'm no doubt there's a cost to it, but not like we get a bill the next day. 8 dogs, $8,000, something like that. No.
Okay, and I know we really need to explore. I read about another local district who was doing it, and they were finding things, but they were having difficulties in prosecuting regarding what they found. So we really have to think through what the results of findings in a canine sweep would be if we were to do it. We've got to be real clear on that.
Yeah, I can tell you, I mentioned that guidance document that I was given, and one of the things that is prescribed in there prior to doing a canine sweep is having a communication and/or dialogue with the community about would you like to see this happen, number one, and assuming that the answer to that is in the affirmative, then communicating with the parents about what to expect. Is it going to happen? How often might it happen? Just to give everybody advance notice, because the guidance is very clear that the objective of the canine sweeps is actually not to find drugs. The idea is to make a statement that drugs are not allowed in school, and our goal in doing dog sweeps is to deter students from bringing drugs to school. And as I said, one of the cautions that they raise there is, if no dogs ever find anything in school, maybe you're trying to deter by doing dog sweeps, but maybe the kids just think it's a joke because they can still get away with hiding stuff in their pants because they know that the dogs are not allowed to sniff their persons. So it's just something to think about.
You mentioned that you had provided some additional supervision at football games.
Yeah.
And could you go and tell in a little more detail like what that supervision is, and do you feel that it's been effective?
You want to speak to that one, Mr. Hallett?
We recognize that we had a huge problem with students coming under the influence, mostly alcohol, at football games, hockey games, and boys' basketball games. It was getting pretty serious, and Dr. Goger and I had a long discussion about what we could do to dissuade students from showing up impaired. So we have an assistant principal who is assigned to each of those venues. We have not seen the similar problems with the other sports. We, for some reason, don't have a lot of people showing up intoxicated to field hockey games. I can't figure out why not. But anyway, and it's been very effective. We have cut down students who feel that's a kind of a rite of passage to come to games under the influence. Do we still have it? Yeah, we get an occasional student or two who really shows up intoxicated. So it's been very effective.
Thanks, Frank.
Okay, so we're going to go back up on the stage. And then we'll see that one. This one goes here.
Actually, I don't. Does that fit okay there? Yeah. Oops, sorry.
Is this one mine, right? This is the roof. Yeah, this is the food space.
Okay, we are up to item number 8, which is the superintendent's report. Can I have a motion for items number 1 and 2? Under superintendent's report, Elaine, second. Bev, thank you. Nick, did you have anything to say? Okay, a roll call, please.
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Swerner?
Yes.
Dr. Vierik?
Yes.
Mrs. Cassell?
Yes.
Mrs. McGowan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes,
Madam President?
thank you. Okay, we're up to public forum on agenda items. Please, if you walked in late, I had asked that people keep their comments to a 5-minute maximum. When you come up to the podium, there's a clipboard to put your name and address, and please tell us your name and address. And there's a microphone laying right in front there, down in the front. Thank you.
Nobody's.
It's right there. Yep, that one.
Good evening. My name is Georgiana Parrell, and I live at 51 Riverside Drive here in Basking Ridge. Tonight is the second time that I've come before the school board to speak about random drug testing. I'm a parent, but I'm also an employee of the school district. I've worked at the high school as the attendance officer for the past 14 years. In this position, I have come to know and love a great many of our students. The last time I spoke to the board was about 7 years ago. At that time, my daughter was a junior at Ridge High School, and I asked you to consider adopting random drug testing. Back then, I said that when I first started working at the high school, things were pretty much black and white, meaning you kind of knew who was using and who wasn't. By the time that my daughter entered high school in 2004, it really became evident that that wasn't the case anymore. It had gone from black and white to gray. I told the board that evening that being a parent was one of the toughest jobs around, and that random drug testing would be a powerful tool for any student to use to help them to say no to drugs if the situation were to arise. As a parent, I would want my daughter to have this opportunity. The motion wasn't passed. A few years later, that proposal was again brought to the board and didn't pass again, even though at that time, the drug and alcohol survey showed that 32% of our seniors were experimenting with drugs, which was 7% higher than the national average. At that point, the board felt that drinking was a major problem in our town. The survey also found that students were beginning to experiment with drugs at 15 years old, freshmen for some children. I would venture to say that that age is a lot lower now. Since that time, drinking has continued to be a problem here, but drugs have taken on a life of their own in our community, and they have become an epidemic. I see it as a parent, but more importantly, as someone who deals with 1,900 students on a daily basis. I consider these kids my own, and sadly have known children in our town that have battled true drug addictions and have won, as well as some who have lost the battle. We can no longer sit back and wait for someone else to take action or expect it to magically disappear. Education in the classroom is a wonderful thing, but as a parent of a former teenager, I can tell you that kids are kids. They are fearless, and no matter how much you talk to them about the dangers and risks of drugs, they think, it'll never happen to me. We have had 4 graduates die in the last few months. How many more lives are we willing to risk? We had a major drug bust this past spring in our town. The dealers were a senior in our high school and a graduated sibling. I'm really embarrassed to say that at the graduation ceremony, this senior got the loudest applause of the day from the other graduates. Makes you think, who are the drugs being sold to? This problem is not going to go away anytime soon. You've acknowledged that there is a drug problem and that parents need to take action. And collaboratively, we need to work together to protect our teenagers, to save lives and provide a safe environment, not just for our students of today, but for the students of the future as well. There are many children in our town that struggle with the issues of drugs, and if we can save just one life by instituting random drug testing, then I believe it's worth it. A few weeks ago, Carol Spina came before this board asking you to revisit random drug testing. Since that time, Carol and I have formed a coalition of parents in towns called Parents for Substance-Free Kids. Our mission is in response to the epidemic of drug and alcohol use among teenagers in our community. It's to take action to keep our kids safe from substance abuse and to build a safer community. As you can see, parents are willing to take action and support our efforts for change. Just look at the people out in this audience tonight, which normally don't come to a board meeting. While some of you have stated that parents have to take responsibility for this problem, I agree, but unfortunately, we need help. Most choose to believe that their child would not be at risk since they have had conversations with their kids.
30 seconds, sorry.
I'm sorry, and have been assured that they would never do drugs. Guess what? Kids say what you want to hear, and they do things differently. I can leave my speech here for you to read further. I'd be happy to. And the last thing that I will tell you is I have a letter here that was written by a parent in New Jersey this past Friday night. It's heartbreaking, and it reads like something that could be coming from one of our parents, and I'd like you all to read it. Thank you for consideration.
My name is John Bertaglia. I reside at 55 Lake Road. I've had 3 children go through this district. I also serve on the family board at Daytop, New Jersey, a youth residential addiction treatment center in Mendham and in Pittsgrove. It is beyond dispute that there is a heroin epidemic in this township and in New Jersey in general. This fact is well documented, and to deny this well-documented fact is simply to put one's head in the sand. Among the reasons is the easy access to heroin, which is now easier to obtain and cheaper than either alcohol or marijuana, and is no longer the so-called bad kids who are using it. The good kids are doing so too. The ease of access is much to blame. Heroin use cuts across all demographic lines. Whereas in the past, the so-called good kids would occasionally experiment with alcohol or pot, now they are experimenting with heroin. And surely, we can all recall situations where one of the good kids, drinking for the first time, became violently ill due to their lack of understanding of their tolerance level. Is it not reasonable to think that a like or much more worse result would occur from a first experimentation with heroin? What can we do about this? The first thing, which is so simple there is no reason not to do, is to get rid of all your unused prescriptions. There is a box at police headquarters. If you have any elderly family in the area, get rid of their unused prescriptions. It is from family members where kids most frequently obtain the prescription drugs they abuse. And it is well documented that abuse of prescription drugs leads to abuse of heroin. Second, realize that if you believe your kid is using drugs, they probably are. Now, it may be that you have such a good relationship with your son or daughter that they would never lie to you, but the person using drugs is not your son or daughter. They may look like your kid, but your child is not a person who uses drugs. A person using drugs will say whatever they need to say to hide their usage. Third, look for the obvious signs: failing grades, change of friends, loss of interest in normal activities, refusal to participate with the family, sleeping for extended hours during the day. All of these are evidence of illegal drug use. Fourth, support random drug testing. Now, I know the various arguments against drug testing. Let me speak to some of them. First, it infringes on their right to privacy. Please, we're in the midst of a crisis. Those who promulgate this argument need to straighten their priorities. Besides, the Supreme Court of New Jersey has specifically decided that random drug testing is appropriate. Second, it won't work. This is one of the arguments opponents use against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. If it saves one life, it works. Studies show random drug testing is ineffectual. Studies also equally show that it is effective. And these studies which show it to be ineffectual cannot measure how many kids did not use heroin on any given day because of the random testing. It shows our kids we don't trust them. Now, no doubt there are kids in this district who we don't trust. And if a slight inconvenience to your child saves the life of the other kid, it's well worth the cost. It's too costly. I understand in actuality the cost is quite minimal. An isolated incident will become part of their permanent record. It is my understanding that the first notification is only to the parents. Continued positive findings mean that there is a real problem that needs to be addressed. It will cause harm to the sports teams. Please, sports is but a season. Addiction is a lifelong event. One last comment. Random drug testing is the wave of the future. Do we step up to the forefront, or do we wait and watch another kid in our district die?
I think I have the longest street name. My name is Maria Carolla, and I live at 41 Madisonville Road. I don't public speak. It's not my forte. I have an 8th grade son who will be going to Ridge next year. My husband went to Ridge. I have become very reluctant and uncomfortable to send my son there. I have thought, I am very willing to be a parent in this town. My son will not. I will not tolerate drinking, and I will not tolerate doing drugs. And my husband is on board with me. We will not have parties at our house. Backpacks will be searched. We're not playing this game. My son is going to be at Ridge 40 or more hours a week. I would like to know what we can do together to protect not only him, but the other children that are going there. I'm shaking. I don't know if random drug testing is the answer, but it doesn't seem that what we're doing now is enough. I'm willing to try, and I'm willing to have my son tested. A drug addict isn't going to tell you the truth anyway, so it's better to test them and try. If it saves one child, it would be worth it. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Teresa Lane, and I live on North Maple Ave. I have 3 kids between middle school and high school. This is the first time I've come to a Board of Ed meeting, and it's the topic that got me to come. I was here a couple of weeks ago for the movie and the discussion on pills to heroin, and I want to kind of reframe a question that I asked that night. And also, I've just done a little bit more thinking about a suggestion. As I was leaving that night to come over, I asked my 8th grader and my 10th grader if they would come with me. And my 8th grader said, no, I don't do drugs, come on, Mom, and, was kind of just, I wasn't going to get her here. My 10th grader gave me a more interesting answer. And she said, first of all, I have too much homework, and I just can't come. And she said, second of all, I know how important this topic is, but why are they having it at night? It should really be a topic that is done and delivered during the school day. And so I really like that thought. And I said to her, you know what, I'm going to ask that question after the presentation. Then I got here and heard the testimonials from the people on the stage, and they were really, truly heartbreaking and remarkable. And what I think would be one step, because obviously this is a really complicated topic and there's not any easy solution in our area or anywhere in this country on this topic, but I think our kids need to hear those kind of testimonials and the really raw stories of kids who look like them, who sound like them, who are from their town, who could be them. And, the mom who spoke about her Ridge graduate and, the brave stories that were told that night. I mean, half this was a packed auditorium, and I don't know if there was a dry eye in here. It was really just so powerful to hear those stories. I've got to believe it would be for our kids too. And so I really would encourage this group to think about a way to incorporate those real life stories into the daytime. I would gladly give up a day of instruction. I know it's not that easy, but I would gladly give it up for a day of health and well-being. And I don't think it just has to be drug and alcohol. It could be depression and bullying and peer pressure, and some of these topics are really entwined with each other. So that's really what I wanted to say tonight. Oh, the one other thing is, I think we have a great opportunity to involve the school, the PTO, and even some of the student leaders in pulling together real life instruction around this heavy-duty topic, not curriculum-based, but hearing from the people who they can relate to. So I would put the peer leaders to work in coming up with part of a solution that the PTO and the school administration and the Board of Ed all come together to say, you know, we're in this together, and we've got to do something that is a little bit creative and steps outside the box than just having them sit down and learn instruction about how alcohol or drugs are so harmful. So that's really all I wanted to say. It's just, there's nothing, I don't think there's any substitute to hearing the raw personal stories from addicts, former addicts, and from parents of addicts. It's really quite extraordinary to hear that. Thank you.
Sorry, good night. My name is Alejandro Lopez. This year, I will have a son joining REACH, so it's the first time for me, it's new for me. This 2 points, I hear and see people trying to identify the guy having the drugs and having these random checks. And also, I saw in the presentation, when we identify the guy, we throw away for 10 days. And then we reduce the parking space. In my view, parking is the less important topic if I'm a drug addict, no? Even I would love to have that suspension because I would be parking far away from this place. Secondly, that we're just throwing away the kid to ask him to solve his problem by himself with the family. For some reason, this guy is in drugs. So I hear that you have relations with the police, with departments. I'm not sure if you have to send the kids to community work, to mandate a community service to a specific place that the kids realize what will happen in the future if they continue with that mood, no? And direct the effort on that side instead of throwing the kid out of the school that doesn't have any benefit because they come back again, yeah? So that's my proposal to you, to direct the kids to that community service. And the second point I see here around coming from Mexico, in essence, I don't see a place here where the kids can get distracted and enjoy life, you know? I see a lot of, I see all the kids going to the house in the basements, get drugs or get beers, because that's the only place they can have fun. You cannot go out because you have the police stopping you because you are racing the car or just chatting on the street. So maybe the community needs to start building some recreation areas for young adults to go and party, dancing, playing cards, whatever you can imagine. But there's no play around here to have that done. So that's my proposal to you also, to play community recreational areas for young adults. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Hecht. My wife and I have 3 children in Cedar Hill. And I wanted to ditto what the lady before, Alejandro, was speaking about. I think one of the most powerful things when it comes to drug addiction is to hear people tell their stories. And I think that we were all very moved last week when those 2 young men told their stories and the woman in the audience told her story. And it got me to thinking throughout the week about a program that is reminiscent to a program that we may remember from the perhaps 80s and 90s called Scared Straight, when people from prison would come into the school systems and talk to the different children. And so the idea would be a program called Scared Sober, where addicts in recovery would have a day in the school system, perhaps starting in elementary school and then in high school. And I think what's interesting about that is, number one, as we all experienced last week, it's just an unbelievably powerful experience to hear that. And I think different from the idea of drug testing, which I think is a tool that perhaps could be used during school. During high school. I don't know much about it, so I'm not going to talk about it. But hearing people talk about their experience is more of a life lesson, which I think you would never forget for your entire life. I will never forget those two young men speaking last week, and I will never forget how that woman spoke in the audience. Never for the rest of my life will I forget that. And recently, I've had reason to become acquainted with the recovery process of drug addiction, and I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about the rehab and the whole system involved and the lingo and the whole world of it. And again, one of the most powerful parts of that whole world is the addict telling his or her story. And I think that could be an unbelievably powerful, relatively straightforward program that could be instituted in the school system. And it's a program that I would be happy to be part of in terms of implementing, in terms of connecting with former addicts, creating days where we can come in and a program of sorts to kind of introduce that to the children. And I think that could be very powerful and be a lifelong lesson. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Adeline Sant Foster. I live on 24 North Finlay Avenue, and I agree with the gentleman that just spoke and Teresa. I've thought how much the From Pills to Heroin impacted my evening after I listened to the teenagers or the young men and the mother. And I too thought the same. That I think it would have a profound impact on the students to hear from children, students from their generation, and to also let them know the difficulty of the recovery process. It doesn't go away in a year. It's a lifetime of recovery. And I have two beautiful children, and I hope to keep them healthy and engaged in life and not have to go through such a hurtful and painful road. And I lived in a city, and I saw many kids of my age when I was a teenager die because of drugs. And I said, you know, I want to move to a town that's safe and beautiful, and the education is good, and my kids are safe. And I'm starting to feel unsafe for them. So I would love to have random drug testing. I would like to have students come in and speak about their trials and their recovery. And the last thing is that raising them is such a gift. And to lose them to such a horrible addiction, it would be really sad for our community. So with that, I would love to see, again, one more child. The family, it's such a loss for the family to lose a loved one. So I am for the random drug testing, and I appreciate that if you can do more for the community. Thank you.
Hello, Heather Lusardi, Old Farm Road. I wanted to touch on what Mr. Markarian spoke about, the survey that was just given to the 6th and 8th graders at William Annan last month. I have a 6th and an 8th grader. I signed off that they should take the survey. They're like, why, Mom? We don't do it. Just take it, see what they have to ask you. They came home, they sat at the kitchen table, 3:15 that day. How did it go? Mom, I can't believe they took us out of class for this. Why? What did it say? It asked us things over and over, the same question. They just changed a word here and there. Okay, well, what else did it ask you? It asked us about things I've never even heard of, Ma. How to use things. I've never even heard of these things. Are they trying to influence us, tell us how to use these things, or all about these drugs? We don't need to talk about it, Ma. It was stupid. That's obviously what a 6th and an 8th grader say that really have not heard about half these words and not involved. But what are you doing with these surveys? I heard you say they're going to come back in a year. Do you actually ever come back to the students at William Annan in an assembly and say, this is what we found out? Or do you just use it to tell each other, tell the staff, tell us? Do the students ever find out what the results were? And from a teacher, like all these moms and dads said, they listen to the staff more than they listen to us. We tell them, it goes in one ear and out the other. When it comes from a teacher sitting on an at an assembly, that is much more powerful than coming from home at a kitchen table or a car ride. We can only get through them so much. But again, if you are taking them out of class for this survey, I don't know how long it lasted, maybe a period, maybe half a period, I'm not sure. They need to understand and know what those results were. And a brief, it doesn't have to go into major detail because they are still 6th and 8th graders. But I think they should know from you guys or, their teachers what those results were. And that could help and empower and do something in the future for everybody. Thank you.
My name's Scott Mitzner. I live on Carlisle. I have 2 daughters in 6th and 8th grade, but I also come to you today as someone who practices criminal defense law in this area for the last 18 years, both on the defense side and the prosecution side. I don't need statistics. I don't need to hear what surveys and studies show. I see it every day. I see addiction, and I see addiction everywhere, and kids don't get it until it's too late, and that's where we need to step in. And it's not just addiction that we need to focus on. We need to show these kids what can happen on one experimental use, because I see that every day. And whether it's a DWI, whether it's an arrest, a criminal conviction that can follow them for the rest of their life, or God forbid, as a father of 2 daughters, you took something, knowingly or unknowingly, and you were sexually assaulted that night. And yes, it happens, and yes, it happens here in town. Not just to addicts, but to those kids who say, okay, I'll try it. Everyone else is trying it. And it can be one time. I'm in court in Bernardsville this morning. I serve as public defender for 11 towns around here, and one of them is Bernardsville. Today, I talked to a client last week. He had a minor theft charge and nothing. He didn't show up in court today. I called his house. A woman answered the phone. I assume it was his mom. I don't know. And I said, is Edward coming to court today? It's Scott Mitzner, his public defender. And she broke down in tears. And she told me, as some of you may have heard, Edward died last week. How did he die? Heroin. This was a Bernards High grad, died last Tuesday, I believe it is. I just talked to him. Talked to the mom for about 15 minutes from the court on my cell phone. She said he was a good kid, had never been in any real trouble, but he tried it. And that's another one, another statistic. How many do we need? Mr. Markarian, I respect you. I respect the presentation you put together. But your list of action, number 1 said review, blah, blah, blah. Number 2 said evaluate, blah, blah, blah. Number 3 said review. We are past that point. Every day that we review and evaluate, another Edward happens. Another kid from around here dies or faces a criminal record or, God forbid, sexually assaulted or something like that. The time for action is now. Now, it's easy to say, where are the parents? And I agree. Parents need to take a much more active role, and I take that to heart, and that's how I raise my children. But the reality is, schools are here for several reasons, not just to educate our kids and get them into college. That's not it. You're here to protect our children, and you're certainly here not to exacerbate the problem. Now, what do I mean by that? When we talk about Ridge all the time, we hear stress, pressure. When I talk to Ridge High students, when my daughters are going there next year, stress and pressure. Partnership for a Drug-Free America did a survey a few years ago. They polled teens, and 73% of teens, 73% said that the number one reason by far that teens use drugs is to deal with the pressures and stresses of school. Now, our pressures and stresses are going up. We all know that. What do we think is going to happen? This is not brain surgery. It's right there in front of us, and steps need to be taken now. Now, I agree. Fear is a great tactic. Okay? I don't think, and I knew the two gentlemen on stage, and I commend them tremendously for getting up there and speaking. But we need more. It should be during school. I agree. When we were kids and we went to a presentation, it scared straight. There was someone in a wheelchair up there who talked about the night they drove drunk or they got in the car with somebody who drove drunk. And we saw what could happen. Kids need to see that. They need fear. They need drug testing. They need rewards as well. If we want to say grades are the most important thing, make it extra credit. Make them go to these presentations. Give them an offer that it's extra credit, something. But it's there. Steps need to be taken now. Now, finally, suspicion-based testing, with all due respect, I know what the numbers are. They're awful. They're way down because that's only teachers reporting. Students know who's using. Parents know who's using. Open that up, okay? If students report it or parents report it, act on it as a school. Right now, the school policy is unless it comes from an education personnel, you take no action. That's not going to get us there. And Mr. Markarian, you said that things can't be done easily, and I agree with that. But let's try. Let's not review and evaluate and review. Let's make that effort, and let's save our kids, please.
Hello, my name is Carol Spina. I live at 481 Minebrook Road. I have 4 children, 3 who already graduated from Ridge and 1 who's in 8th grade. I first want to thank the board for opening dialogue for policies and practices for drug and alcohol prevention in our schools, as it demonstrates to the community you recognize the problem at hand and that changes need to be made. I recognize that it may take many changes in our schools and communities to help put an end to the epidemic of drug and alcohol abuse amongst teenagers. The first and foremost change I urge you to consider, again, is implementing random drug testing as a tool for prevention, not punishment. We need to give kids a tool to use as a reason and an excuse to say no to drugs and alcohol, one that will deter and detect drug abuse. One of our main goals as a parent coalition is to help reevaluate, redevelop, and re-educate parents on the tools that can give our kids a reason and excuse to avoid drugs and alcohol. Random drug testing is a tool that is focused on prevention, not punishment, and would send a message to students and the community that drugs and alcohol would not be tolerated in our schools. There's a website that I've shared with you, is preventionnotpunishment.org, for more information and statistics on the success of this program. There will never be a solution that pleases everyone. Therefore, a random drug testing proposal cannot be all or nothing. There must be a compromise that allows a version of random drug testing to move forward in order to eliminate the domino effect of substance abuse and to save lives. As you know, schools in our areas have implemented random drug testing. Despite some initial parent opposition, random drug testing was implemented, and by doing so, they sent an indelible message to their students and parents that they are taking action to ensure a drug-free school environment. By having zero tolerance for substance abuse and ensuring support for those that need help, these schools have created a safe institution for learning. This is the measure of success in random drug testing program, and is a message that our school district must send our kids and community as well. I urge you to help create a drug-free school zone by instituting random drug testing as a first step in helping kids say no to drugs and alcohol. Many additional steps must also be taken once random drug testing is in place. One of those may be safe homes, as an online list of parents who promise not to allow or serve alcohol to minors posted on the school or municipal alliance websites. Another possibility is a Safe to Tell program where kids or others can place anonymous calls when someone is in crisis, a dangerous situation, or abusing drugs or alcohol. This is also at a website, safetotell.org, for more information. As a parent coalition, we want to work together with the Board of Ed and all members involved and support you in taking action to end the epidemic of drug and alcohol abuse in our schools and community. We are counting on you to respond to the outcry of our concerns and institute random drug testing and other tools to help keep our kids safe. Thank you.
I've not used one of these before. My name is Tammy Lane. I live here in Basking Ridge and have for over 30 years. My 3 children went through the school system. I would tell you 30 years ago when I came, I didn't know anything. I was like these young folks out here who said, oh, this is a wonderful place, and I've heard all about the great education, and it's terrific. And that's the way I felt. And then once you live in the community, you find out that, oh gosh, you know what? They brought in this wonderful principal, Principal Tonarelli. Why did they bring her in? Because I was naive, just like a lot of these parents are naive. They're naive about their kids' drug use. I was naive about the community. And, oh, they brought her in because we had drugs in Basking Ridge. Oh, my goodness. This is not the first time that this has come before this board or any other board. But this is a time for you to act. I'm curious. I did see one of you. I don't know all of you, but I am curious. I would like to know how many of the board members attended the program the other night, because it truly was powerful, and it does show you what commitment that you need to have to understand this, so that you don't act out of community pressure not to act. You need to act. We are losing kids. I was a high school nurse before I became an elementary school nurse. I've been in the field for over 30 years in school nursing. I was at Hunterdon Central. I lost kids at Hunterdon Central 27 years ago to heroin. I go to all, in fact, there was a wonderful program put on by the DEA and the state within the last 2 years that I attended, and it was because the DEA targeted New Jersey as the heroin, one of the heroin capitals, that we were losing that many kids. They wanted the school nurses to go and to know about it. We are there. I can't tell you as a school nurse, and I know you're a school nurse, that if we know we're going to send, when I was at Hunterdon Central, the kids would come in from the parties, and they would be not feeling so good on Monday, so where did they show up? They showed up in my office. But our emphasis has to be on saving, getting away from fear and saving lives. And that means not putting a political or a consequence of legalities. It's a consequence of health, that we want you to go to drug testing, that we want you to show that you've got some specific criteria to meet to make sure that we are getting these kids the treatment they need. When a medical person, okay, a doctor, very easy, they can get an OxyContin. You know, you can take that and you're high. They can take that. If they get hooked, you could get hooked on one dose. The amygdala, which is your pleasure center, goes crazy, and you want that drug. And these kids, and if you didn't hear those kids come, you should have. And shame on you if you didn't. And I know I shouldn't be saying that because I might lose your, wanting to act. But shame on you, because this is what the community's dealing with, losing kids. And so what I would say to you is that I have professionally and personally dealt with these issues. We need to help parents to have the consequences, but you have to support us. And yes, there was some comment that we only have the kids in school for 6 hours, but that doesn't mean that they should not have a safe environment, that those parents that are in the 6th grade right now or in the 8th grade right now, that they know that when they come up here next year, and you can't wait until next year, you can't take and study. You've got to put your action in, your plan in action now. Start getting those the random drug testing set up for testing for next September so that they know that they're going to expect that. Get the dogs in. I don't think, that we're doing enough. Whatever we can do and whatever consequences we can do for these children, we have to do. We have to. If you want to talk about cost to the community, cost to the nation, cost to the health system, if we can intervene early, we know we can make a difference with kids. And we know with drug addiction that sometimes the recidivism is that they have to do it 2 and 3 times. They start in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. That's what they did 30 years ago. They may not know it all yet, but they're going to learn it. So that parent, they're going to learn it because that's what they teach each other. And that's scary because I didn't know that. And do we need a safe homes thing? Absolutely.
Okay, I'm
I
sorry,
saved
you're
the
5
kid.
minutes.
I saved
You're
the
at 5
family
minutes.
because my child, I said, be careful of that one because my child was hurt.
Okay.
So we need
Thank
it
you.
all.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Dunton, 35 Carlisle Road. I have 2 boys at Ridge and 1 who recently graduated. And I'm just stunned to hear the idea that if you brought in canines that you don't think you would find anything. Because all they have to do is hang out in the men's rooms of this building during the school day. I would like to know, what you guys are going to do so that my kids can graduate from this building without having to encounter drugs being exchanged or abused in the men's rooms during their school day. Thank you.
Hi, Bridget Yeager, Old Coach Road. A few things. When I was a little girl in 2nd grade, I remember at the elementary school showing a video of a bus and a little kid not walking around the gate and the little kid getting mangled. And, I remember from that day forward, I went like 20 yards down the road before I crossed for that bus because it had a big impact. When I was 10, my neighbor was killed riding his bike to the library on a summer day, and I attended his funeral. And, in college, I was the designated driver for my entire college career. These stories and these tragedies that happen in the things that were shared at that meeting, I do see a huge value in it for children. Those 2 things certainly guided me through my life and through today as well. I also feel that there is a malicious entity that is attacking our town and our children. I think that, the peer dynamic of diffusing the guilt or the fear of making these bad choices and covertly putting things in and getting other kids addicted who may or may not have wanted to even attempt it is a frightening thought and a frightening reality in this district. And I think that we need to do as much as we can to help prevent it and also to identify because, as we have learned, there are kids who did not make that choice to try it that first time. That choice was taken and decided by somebody else. And I think to help a parent and to help a kid, I think random drug testing is going to be an effective way to find that. Because not everyone chose to do it that first time. So I see a value in that, and I see a value in anything and everything that we can do whether we put those sensors above the doors that kind of sense something coming into a building, or the dogs, or the drug testing. I think all those things are valuable, and I think that we need to do that because I think there are children who are, the statistics are staggering, they're increasing, and our children are being attacked, and I think we need to do everything we can to stop it.
I'm Lisa Winter, 507 South Maple Avenue. Sorry, Lisa Winter, 507 South Maple Avenue. This drug situation that we're hearing about is so scary. I have 3 teenagers. 2 went through Ridge, one's still there. I've always been worried about drugs. I mean, what parent of teenagers doesn't? But it's particularly scary now, hearing about these prescription drugs that are so addictive and leading to heroin, which is apparently readily available. It's horrifying to me. I think we've heard a lot of great ideas tonight that I hope, and I know you will pursue all of them. But the thing I wanted to speak about was random drug testing, and I want you to pursue that as an idea. I was on the board 5 years ago when we looked at it, and when I first heard about it, I liked the idea. As a parent, it gave me a lot of relief. It made me think, okay, this is going to really help at school, and it's going to give me a lot of relief that my kids aren't going to be as exposed to drugs. But the thing is, the more I looked into it, the problem is there's not only evidence that it doesn't work, but there was a study back then that showed it actually had negative consequences. So it's not a matter of studies that show that it's not as effective as we want it to be. It's a matter of it actually having negative consequences. That's the scary thing about random drug testing. Mr. Markarian, you said there are studies that go both ways. I actually haven't seen studies that support it, but I am eager to. And if there are studies that show it's effective and that counteract the studies that show negative consequences, I am all for it, because if it helps even a small number of kids to not do drugs, then of course it's worth it. And I know you feel that way. I know cost is not an issue in your minds, that you're really just trying to find the most effective programs to try and solve this problem. And that's what's really important. It's not go with random drug testing because you want to help kids. It's find the best programs you can because you want to help kids. And the 2 studies that leap out when you look at random drug testing are powerful and negative. And it's important that everybody see these. The one is there's a study that is 14 years, and it's from 1998 to 2011. It covered 14 years of schools using random drug testing. It covers 89,000 students in 800 middle schools and 157,000 high school students in 1,400 high schools. And the results of that study was that there was moderately lower marijuana use, but there was increased use of illicit drugs other than marijuana. That's a really important result. I hope that you flesh that out, because if we implement random drug testing and kids use less marijuana, but more prescription drugs, more cocaine, more heroin, that's a problem. The other study is also very rigorous, and it came out of Oregon, and it comes from the Oregon Health and Science University, and it says that random drug testing is not reliable in keeping teen athletes from using drugs. And in fact, the mere presence of drug testing increases some risk factors for future substance use. So these are very surprising because it seems like drug testing should work. It appeals to me intuitively that it would help my kids say no, and that it would keep my kids from being exposed to drugs. That's what I liked about it. But I tried to think, well, why would the studies show the opposite effect? And I'll say this happens all the time. I mean, you know, if you think about medical science, hormone replacement therapy was considered very successful and prescribed to a lot of women, and then they did an in-depth study, and they found there were a lot of negative consequences that nobody anticipated, so they stopped prescribing it. So it is important to pay attention to these studies. I hear some of the reasons I think maybe it didn't work. One is that drugs stay in your blood different amounts of time. Marijuana sticks around for 4 to 6 weeks, but other drugs like heroin and cocaine stick around for 2 days, maybe 4 days. Then they're no longer available for testing, and kids know that. So they know they're going to be tested. They maybe stop doing the marijuana, and they do other drugs that they know will not be testable. If they do them on Friday, it won't be in their blood anymore the next week. The other thing I think is that teenagers are terrible at assessing risks. We know this. They're not very good about it. They don't think about consequences very well. So if we know that, why would they ever care about the consequences of a drug test? We already know they're not very good. They think nothing will happen to me. Bad things won't happen to me. So that might be a reason why the drug testing doesn't work, even if we think it should. The other thing is, the more I thought about it, I started thinking, I'm worried about impact on the climate at the school. I thought to myself, why don't I drug test my own kids? Well, the reason is, I would never drug test them unless I was suspicious, because I know it would impact the trust that we have. I think the same thing could happen in the school. The administrators are basically saying, we think you're doing drugs, and now we're going to test your urine to see. And I think impacting climate at the high school can have very serious consequences for teenagers. And I think there have been studies that show that climate has a bigger impact on teenagers doing drugs than other things. So people have mentioned some great ideas. I'll finish up. I love the ideas of testimony. I think that's so powerful. I love the ideas of encouraging teachers and parents to report out on suspicious behavior more. I think I as a parent want to know if teachers are worried about my kids. I want to know from other parents if they know something about my kids I don't know. I want you to look at everything, and that includes random drug testing, but I know I, for one, would want to see some evidence that it has positive result and not a negative.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, my name is Tom D'Addario. My wife and I, Elaine, live on Dykeman Place in Basking Ridge, and I'm very much for random drug testing. Originally, I was very much against it when I first heard about it. You know, my first instinct was, well, it's kind of like a violation of somebody's personal rights. And then I thought about it, and I said, well, seatbelts, they're a violation of rights. Smoking in a restaurant, they're a violation of rights. And then I thought about it a little more, and drug addiction is a disease. So is screening someone for a disease a violation of their rights? And I said, no. You know, years ago you would always be tested for various diseases. And as serious as the drug use seems to be in this town, how bad could testing for it be?